with Kaley Concannon, and we're chatting about her experience in the Peace Corps in Kyrgyzstan. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Kaley, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us 5 things about yourself?
Sure. So, like you said, Kayla Concannon, graduated in 2019, so almost exactly a year now. And I now speak better Kyrgyz than I do Russian. Uh, what else? Um,
You
I
stu- you
spent.
you
Oh, sorry,
studied
go ahead.
you studied Russian here, and you were a SPREES major, right?
Yes. Uh, I was on the rowing team at Stetson the whole 4 years that I was there. Uh, what else do I have going on? Uh,
You spent several months in Osh, Kyrgyzstan, which is in the south of Kyrgyzstan, right across the border from
mhm.
Uzbekistan. But you were evacuated mid-March. Is that correct?
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit. So I got a question. What were you doing there, and how did you get there?
So, how I got there, I had been looking at different ways that I would be able to go abroad and continue to try to speak Russian, but I had gone through, looked at different programs that wasn't sure how comfortable I was going abroad for the first time with them. And with something like the Peace Corps, you're basically handed the best guarantee that they can give you that you'll be safe wherever you're going. Uh, and, medical coverage throughout the time period and everything, which ended up coming in handy. Uh, but Kyrgyzstan was the main Russian speaking region that I saw that was available for applications at the time that I was putting them out there. And on top of that, my boyfriend that I was trying to go abroad with had been studying um, religion and Middle Eastern history at Stetson as well. So that kind of brought those worlds together. And so applied there and shipped out July 5th. And then while we were actually in Kyrgyzstan, we were both working as TEFL teachers, teaching English as a foreign language, and not only teaching the kids there, but teaching the various teaching methods, the communicative English teaching method, to the local teachers there. Uh, and that was much more of a job than teaching the kids, actually.
So, did they prepare you before you went to? Tell us a little bit about what Peace Corps does with new recruits.
Yeah, so we had about 2.5 months that we were with well, our first week was in a hotel where they tried to get us through the jet lag and started some very basic safety precautions, like lessons on what to do and what not to do culturally. Then started the very beginning of our basic language lessons. And after that first week and a half, we went out to our first host families who had gone through more extensive training than our permanent host families would have been through. And we spent that next time learning the language, learning the culture, and learning the teaching methods that they were looking for us to
So,
put in
so,
place.
so did you learn Kyrgyz?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
They had recently shut down the Russian aspect of their teaching program a few years ago.
Although Russian is spoken widely in Kyrgyzstan, that's not so much the case in Osh, though, is it?
No, so actually, the host family, my permanent host family in Osh, they specifically sent their daughter, who was about 7 years old, to get private lessons in Russian. So it's everyone understands it there. The media is very frequently in Russian. They have translations, especially in the South, of different like Turkish shows or Korean shows. They have translated into Kyrgyz, but for the most part, if you turn on well, they'll have radio stations as well. A lot of what you'll see is Russian, and if they ever see a white person, they just assume Russian and start speaking to you that way. Actually, it's funny how they often don't separate the two languages in their mind, because I would have a conversation with someone with them continuously speaking to me in Russian, and me responding in Kyrgyz and them not switching over the entire time.
Yeah, fascinating. So talk to me a little bit. I've never been to Osh. I've been to Bishkek, which is a very, very Soviet city, a very 20th century city. But Osh is historically part of Uzbekistan. It's a much older region. What's Osh like? Tell me.
Well, so it's funny you said that because even going through Osh, I remember looking at buildings and thinking, oh, that looks so Soviet.
Yeah.
Like the brutalist architecture, or just in general, you can tell how little has been built since that time period. There's the buildings that are all the apartment buildings and everything, very rarely have they been refurbished. And so they look their age.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it's a nice little city. It's funny that when they're teaching kids how to speak in English and they talk about Osh, they tell kids to describe it as a town, which is very funny to me, given that it's the second largest city in the country. But it is significantly smaller than Bishkek, and it's interesting to see how the historic Silk Road has caused the different bazaars to pop up. I never actually got to go to the gold market that they had there, but I know that has a significant presence, and you'll see people along the streets that have their little signs up telling you that they buy gold and you can exchange them right there. No idea how many of them actually had real products, but...
Right. So you were there you were in Kyrgyzstan from July, and in Osh soon thereafter, and you spent a few months there, and then you were evacuated out of Osh because of COVID-19, the disease caused by the novel coronavirus. Talk to me a little bit about all of that. I mean, that came out of nowhere for everyone. So what was it like experiencing the blossoming of the pandemic in a place like Osh?
I think the strangest part of it was how geographically close we were to it and how long it took for the effects to actually reach us. And part of that being that, there's not nearly as much international travel in Kyrgyzstan as there are in other areas. But the first that we had...
Shan is here. Shan, Shan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So this is Shan Karemani, and Shan, I'm recording this conversation. It's no big deal. And I don't know if you know Kaley Concannon or you remember her.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And we're just like chatting about her time in the Peace Corps, and I'll talk to you, Shan, in a couple seconds. But I think it'll be interesting for you to hear Kaley's experience. She was in Osh, Kyrgyzstan, with the Peace Corps, and then was evacuated March 15th. Is that the right date?
I was officially flying out on the 21st.
On the 21st of March, out of Bishkek. And they flew you back, and now you're no longer part of the Peace Corps because the Peace Corps has rolled up the carpet and shut all the doors and shut down all over the world. I'm right there, right? Yeah, they're no longer. I think people don't realize that Osh is not that far from Beijing, and it's right across the border from China in many respects. I mean, it's not at all far from China. You're far closer to Beijing there than you are to Moscow, vastly closer.
I would definitely.
So what was the reaction like inside of Osh? I mean, I know that's a really difficult question, but like were they concerned? I mean, why did the Peace Corps yank you out of Osh?
So I actually had a very interesting experience talking with my host father there, who, because of the situation with the Uyghurs and how they have been persecuting them, he believed it was a divine punishment brought down upon them.
Was he himself a Uyghur?
No.
Yeah.
He's ethnically Kyrgyz.
It should be so the Uyghurs are a ethno-linguistic group. I'm not going to get into the politics and history here, but they're not Chinese. They're Central Asian, but they often work as what are called shuttle traders between China and Kyrgyzstan, and in fact all of the former Soviet Union, and they have been persecuted by the Han Chinese, the dominant ethno-linguistic group in China, are called Han. And so the Uyghurs have been basically, they're largely and you'll have to correct me on this, in Western China, and they're actually quite near to Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. They've been put in internment camps, and their cities have been put under surveillance because they're not seen as Chinese or loyal to the Chinese government. That's interesting. You say that your father said that the COVID-19, the coronavirus, was divine retribution against the Chinese for what they've done to the Uyghurs. That's interesting.
And that was in the relatively early days of the reporting of the virus, before it had really started spreading to other countries.
Yeah. The thing about viruses is that they don't really care what nationality you are, and I'm sure that it hit the Uyghurs just as well as it hit the as it hit the Han Chinese. So you're back. They evacuated you out of Kyrgyzstan. I assume that you came through New York.
Yes.
So out of the frying pan and directly into the fire there. But you didn't spend much time in New York, and you're back here in Florida, and you're getting ready to do what with your life now that Peace Corps has sort of evaporated, at least for the present.
Yeah, so there was some talk of whether or not we would go back to Peace Corps, but it looks like they are not opening up any posts until the end of the fiscal year, so September 30th. And then after that, they're opening up the countries on an individual basis. And given that Kyrgyzstan is having their election period right around that time, they're likely not going to be opening up at all this year. So figured couldn't really wait that long to actually have a paying job, and have started looking in DC. So for the time being, looking for just average clerical office jobs, but it's in the effort of kind of just staving off unemployment until it's safe to go abroad again.
That's great. I mean, like it's a tough time, and anybody who tells you what they know what's going to happen next week, you know that person's a liar, because nobody knows what's happening tomorrow. So I think your horizon is right. Like, well, once things get a little bit clearer, then we're going to stay close to home, but poise ourselves so that we can head back abroad as soon as we can. So do you think you'll go back to Kyrgyzstan? Do you think you'll go back with the Peace Corps or someplace else?
I don't think so. I think I'm not necessarily certain which country I'm looking to go to just yet, but if I were to go through Peace Corps, I would have a lot less control over where I was going and how long I would be there for. And so I'm looking to have a little bit more of that control. You'll hear often from volunteers that is the biggest lacking thing. Yeah, it's just control. And
isn't it 27 months in the Peace Corps?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It is. We were coming up on, I was there about 9 months, and we were getting close to a year, and I was thinking, I'm going to have to do every part of this again for a whole year.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was exhausted.
Yeah. So Kaley, thanks so much for finding some time, and you and I have another conversation. I have to put you in touch with some people and find out what's new with your life. But I'm gonna say goodbye to you, and I'm gonna talk to Shan. Thanks for finding some time to talk to us about Kyrgyzstan, about Russian studies, about OSH, and about the Peace Corps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Peace.
Bye. Bye, Shan.
Bye.
Shan, do you have a video camera? Oh, look at you. Hey, Shan, how's it going? All of a sudden, you just appeared. I'm in my office, as is clear. So this is Shan Karemani. You graduated from SPREES, from Stetson's program in Russian East European Eurasian Studies, about a year ago, in May, and then you went somewhere. So bring us up to date, Shan.
So I was in Kosovo right after I graduated. It was probably like a week or two after that I graduated. And I was there until March 19th, somewhere like that, teaching English in a village in eastern Kosovo.
So that was through Peace Corps.
Yeah, with the Peace Corps. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about um, I don't think most people realize what Peace Corps is and the opportunities that it offers. So if you were to do a little pitch for the Peace Corps more generally, and we'll talk about your experiences. You said you were in Herzegovina?
Kosovo.
Sorry. Eastern Kosovo, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So like leaving aside the specificities of Kosovo, like talk a little bit about your experience with Peace Corps as an organization and the kinds of things that they do.
Well, the Peace Corps is I don't know, it's an interesting organization because it's long, right? That's one of the main things, is that it's 27 months. It's very immersive. You have a very intensive 10-week training that oftentimes breaks volunteers. A few people went home, and it's very intensive. They throw you in this village. They make you learn the language. You have to live with a host family. And then you have to leave that host family and move to another host family after you're done with the training. So it is interesting, but they do a great job of that training. That 10-week training is very helpful, regardless of what um, uh, other volunteers might say. Um, but in general, I think it's one of the greatest organizations that the United States has to offer, because of um, its diversity, and they have um, programs all over the world, and within each country there are different programs. So if you don't want to go to Kosovo to teach English, you can do something like community organizations, or work for an NGO, or whatever it is. So it's very diverse in that sense, which is why I think Peace Corps is one of the better organizations here.
How did the people in Kosovo react to you when you said you were with Peace Corps?
Um, some of them had already knew about the organization, but others didn't, obviously. So, sometimes when I was in a taxi and I had a different experience, right? Because my parents are from there. I speak the local language. I blend in very well. So I had a different experience. But oftentimes when I would be speaking English, for example, like in a taxi with my friends, they would ask, who are you? Where do you come from? And the first thing that they would assume is that we were working with the CIA or something, or we came to get some sort of information. And then when you would try to explain to them, oh no, we're volunteers, well, why would you come to Kosovo? Like, and you're working as a volunteer, you're working for free? Like, it doesn't make sense. So they automatically assume that, we're some spies or something, maybe not from the US, maybe from Russia or from Serbia. And so a lot of people are very suspect of that. So it was a bit interesting.
So, I'm gonna betray a little bit of ignorance here. I would have assumed that most people were speaking Serbo-Croatian, Serbian, Croatian, whatever. What language was the lingua franca in Kosovo where you were? Albanian?
Yeah, Albanian. Albanian is the main language throughout. I think maybe 95% of the country speaks Albanian, and then there are some pockets that speak Serbian or Bosnian, which is the same thing. So.
Which is the same. Yeah, let's not go into those those conversations. Um, so while I've got you here, my guess is that I know way more about Kosovo than the vast majority of people, and I don't know anything about Kosovo. Um, so tell me a few things about Kosovo that people ought to know.
Well, Kosovo is the youngest country in Europe. They were part of Yugoslavia for the better part of the last century. They have been historically part of Serbia, which is why many older Albanians are fluent in Serbo-Croatian. So there is that socialist, communist legacy with Tito in Yugoslavia and Kosovo. It is a multi-ethnic, multinational, multi-confessional state, and it's recognized by, I think, 110 countries in the world. So not fully recognized, but some countries like
Is that a result of the war in Kosovo and in Bosnia and
yes,
Serbia in the 1990s?
yes,
It essentially it broke a very. I mean, we have to be careful because there are so many landmines here. So it was part of Yugoslavia, and then it was part of Serbia after Yugoslavia fell apart, and then it declared itself independent of Serbia and became a United Nations protectorate for a while there,
yes,
essentially, and
yeah,
then, but now considers itself independent of Serbia.
yes. As of 2008, yeah.
What's the like so like it blows my mind to think that you were in a village. So like it's wild enough that you were in Eastern Europe and then wild enough that you were in Kosovo, but it becomes even wilder that you were in some tiny village in Eastern Kosovo.
Yeah.
What was that like, man?
Uh, it was crazy because there's a major distinction between the cities and the villages in Kosovo, and there's often this sort of, oh, he's from the village, he's lower,
Yeah,
so, and
every
exactly, and my family comes from the city side of Kosovo, and me going into the village, I was warned by my family, like, be careful, they might do this, or, and I
very,
realized
very
that
much so the city dweller's view of the country dweller, no matter what country you go to.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't know, it was a great experience because, like, the students there are like incredibly smart. The people there are, just all of these stereotypes that you've heard your whole life, and you just realize that it's like not true and whatever. And these people are like, humans, they're educated, and it was incredible being there.
I just remember so clearly in 2011, Tom Newland, a friend of mine, and I walked from Moscow to Tula. It's about 200 kilometers. And before we left, all of my Moscow friends warned us, oh, as soon as you go into the countryside, they'll fall on you как волки. They'll fall on you like wolves. And they'll like murder you and rape you and burn your body next. And right. So like you're like, oh, you're from Moscow and you've never actually left the city, and so you have all these. It's funny, we have those ideas in the States, but in other countries, those city-country divisions are even stronger. I mean, if you ask somebody from Brooklyn what like life is like in Tennessee, they would probably sound a lot like my Moscow friends telling me that my the country denizens would fall on me like wolves. But still, that isn't as resonant in the United States as it is in a place that's like frankly, I think maybe it's true that the less developed a country is, the more that those divisions are stronger. And the Soviet Union, of course, as you know, had an incredibly strong preference for city dwelling and city life, and like to be a resident of Moscow or Tbilisi or Kiev was every country dweller's dream. Anyway, what was the in? I have no idea what was the infrastructure like. What was like what were the schools like? What were the roads like? What was this village like? You say village, and the pictures I get in my mind are tell me more.
Yeah, it wasn't that, undeveloped. There were paved roads, like, at least in the major, for the major streets and stuff, the roads were paved. but you had maybe some side roads that were not paved. The school itself was a relatively new school, but it's been destroyed. The kids go there, they break the glasses, they write on the walls. The the bathrooms are all destroyed. They have no toilets there, so it's like on the ground. The desks are broken. Everything is pretty in bad condition. So yeah, the school at least. The houses are better. You have some very modern houses because oftentimes the villages in Kosovo have a major diaspora population, and they survive off of these remittances. So you would be surprised when you walk into these villages and see like these 3-story houses with Teslas in their garages. It's incredible sometimes, but yeah.
That's again, like you go into any village anywhere in the world, and that's what you find. And it's like, oh, my relatives in Brooklyn send me $2,000 a month or whatever.
Yeah.
So you're there in May. You take part in Peace Corps during the summer. You're working in this village all of fall and winter, and then mid-March comes, and we have this coronavirus pandemic that starts in January or maybe December in China, but by the beginning of March is global. Peace Corps pulls all of its volunteers from all of its sites all over the world, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, mid-March. Talk to me a little bit about what life was like for you in early March. How did the people of Kosovo react to the pandemic? How did the people in your village react? How did your handlers in Peace Corps react? Talk to me a little bit about fill in some of the blank spaces in my imagination.
Yeah. Well, I was actually in one of the Serbian enclaves in Kosovo. We had a language sort of training there, and I took part in it. And that's when we were notified that, as soon as this language training is done, you will return to your sites and you will stay there until further notice. And I actually had plans on visiting my family on the western side of Kosovo. And after that, we went back to sites. And the next day, I got a phone call early in the morning telling me to pack my bags, and you're going to the capital. We're all gonna go in the capital, stay in a hotel until we have more information because it's no longer safe. So really quickly, I packed one of my bags. I had two, large suitcases and like a smaller bag, and I just put my, a few clothes in there, maybe like my most important things that I had, my computer, my camera, um, and some clothes, but the rest of it I left there, and we all thought that we were going to return back to our
Yeah, of course.
sites. Like I had no idea that it would be safer, for them to send me back to the States, going through all of these different countries and airports, than for me to stay in this tiny, isolated village in Kosovo. I thought that it would be, ridiculous for them to make that decision. But that's what they ended up doing. We were told to leave Kosovo by, the higher ups in the Peace Corps, and so we ended up staying in the capital, Pristina, for about a week in a hotel that was open just for us. Like there was nobody there. They had to open it. They had already closed down, and they opened it up, again just for us. And it was almost like chaos because we couldn't find a plane. There was no plane that would take us from Pristina,
Yeah, of
and
course.
we didn't have like the permission to fly over North Macedonia, and we needed like a military plane from like Jordan, and it was just chaos. Like it was incredible. And anyway, we ended up going to Albania with a bus. They opened the border especially for us, and they tested us at the border.
So I just have to like the surreality of fleeing to Albania.
Yeah, Yeah.
Right, right. I mean, you feel that too. Like
Yeah.
you might be the very first person who has ever said, and then we fled to Albania.
Yeah, I mean that's what it was. And we spent a night in Albania, in the capital Tirana, and then
Tirana. Yeah.
from there we had a flight from Istanbul to JFK, or no, from Istanbul to DC, and then DC to Orlando. And not once were we checked at the airports, not once, not even a temperature check or nothing. And I was shocked because I was seeing on the news like lines at these airports for like 7 hours, and we went by relatively quick, like no problems at all.
This was what was the date? March 20th?
Yeah, March 20th. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I think at that point there's a lot of revisionism that's going on right now, but like Peace Corps was a little early
Yeah.
to its credit, just like the NFL, to its credit. Um, but I don't think anybody knew. I think that doesn't surprise me on March 20th. Now, April 20th, things had changed completely.
Yeah.
But like you were there right at the cusp, like March
Mm.
15th. I think we canceled classes at Stetson on around March 15th. And so that doesn't surprise me totally. But it is astonishing to think. I mean, you were probably about as safe as it gets in a small village in Kosovo. I mean, like I imagine the medical care there is probably not as good as it is here, but rates of infection are probably vastly lower there than anywhere here. It's hilarious, like you probably ran a far greater risk in Washington D.C. and in JFK than you did in Tirana or Pristina or wherever the village in far eastern
But
Kosovo.
what's crazy, I had a conversation with my parents before leaving, and I was going to ask the Peace Corps if I can, instead of going back home, can I stay with my family, because I have family here, like blood family, not host family. And my mom was like, listen, yes, the chances are lower there, but the healthcare there, everything is bad. Like, do not stay there. But what's crazy is that 2 weeks after I had arrived back home here in Florida, a, somebody from the village that I stayed at, which is a very small village where I lived, who was working in Germany, came back with the coronavirus, and that small village has now over 60 infected people, which is incredible, because I was like, I should stay here. I should, and I was, now that whole village is isolated. I mean, nobody can get in or get out.
Wow.
Incredible.
But I mean that's the nature of virus, right? That's
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's what pandemic means.
Yeah.
It flares up here and there unexpectedly, and the only response is essentially lock it down.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, incredible. So you have to go. I have to go. We have to wrap this up. I'm fascinated. Are you still in touch with people back in this village in Kosovo? What's the name of the village?
Topanica.
Tolpanica.
Yeah.
Are you still in touch with those people?
Yeah, of course. I'm in touch with my host family, with some of the older students there, and I was like very popular in that village, so everybody stays in touch with me.
Well, you were there for 6 months.
Almost, yeah, nine
9
months.
months.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that. I mean, you're only 22 years old, or maybe you're 23 now, but like 9 months. That's like 1/23 of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, so what? Crazy. So you come back from this totally chaotic, improvised evacuation via Albania and again,
Yeah.
um, and you're here and you're like in Oviedo or something, aren't you? Where are you in Orlando? Sorry,
Kissimmee.
Kissimmee. Oh.
Yeah.
So you're south of Orlando. What are your plans?
Well, other than waiting for the Peace Corps to see what they say, I'm planning on going to grad school. I'd like to, focus on the Balkans again, maybe find a program, regional studies, and focus on the Balkans. But, I'd like to start by fall of next year. So if Peace Corps can somehow accommodate me to going back there for maybe, a year or maybe 8 months or something, then I would go back. But if not, then I have no choice but to stay here and find a job and just wait for grad school.
So you and I have another conversation, not recorded and not on Skype, about graduate school and places to think about going and processes. But yeah, I mean, and it's very, very, very difficult to apply to graduate schools anywhere from abroad. And so if you're interested in going to graduate school in the United States, those applications are due in December generally, and then on-campus interviews and such are January and February. And so it's very, so so just bear that in mind. Like even, it's not impossible. And of course, people have learned to adapt rapidly to these kinds of things. But so those are some confusing variables to put into the whole equation about return. You've been out for a year. You've done some crazy things. You lived for 9 months in a tiny village in eastern Kosovo. Been part of the Peace Corps. You've been evacuated through Albania, and now you're sitting in your room in Kissimmee. So honestly, talk to me about what you would tell yourself of 1 year ago today. Man, it's been a roller coaster for you. What would you say to the 22-year-old recently minted Stetson alum Shan Karemani 12 months ago?
I would tell him, I would warn him about, the virus, but
all right, beware this virus. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we'd all probably, and then like invest. Why don't you invest in some healthcare?
Yeah.
And lose that 5 pounds, man. It doesn't look good on you. No, I mean, this is a complicated question, and I'm hesitating because it's hard to articulate it.
Yeah.
But has your experience given you a different perspective? And it could be positive or it could be negative. I'm honestly curious.
Yeah.
Has this roller coaster of experience over the last 12 months given you a different perspective on the 4 years you spent at Stetson and in SPREES?
Yeah, of course. I've learned a lot from my experience in Kosovo, and I don't think I would have had the same experience without having that sort of SPREES background. The way of looking at things, and there are tiny things, details in daily life that I just wouldn't have understood as well without that sort of background. But yeah, no, I feel like I see the world differently, of course, in the sense of meeting all different types of people, sitting there, I mean, there are crazy experiences. As an ethnic, like my parents are ethnically Albanian, as am I, and hearing all these stories about Serbs, the so-called enemy, and I'm finding myself in a Serb bar in Kosovo, and I'm talking to Serbs, and they're not killing me, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? Like, and but it's things that you grew up hearing, and it's just great, to experience those things, and it was incredible. The entire experience. I would go through it again, even though I knew that it would get cut, short. But I would definitely do it again.
Was your Stetson education good preparation for the Peace Corps?
Yes, definitely.
I mean, as an organization, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It helped me a lot. It helped me a lot. You know,
Yeah,
both the poli sci and the SPREES, and
I can't
that
remember. Did you spend a semester or a whole year in St. Petersburg?
a semester.
And do you feel like, I mean, again, you're not a typical student because you'd probably already spent time in Albania or Kosovo, I assume. You
Yeah.
had family there and all that, but like that must have been, I mean, how did that experience in Petersburg affect your subsequent experience in
Mhm.
Kosovo?
Well, the experience in St. Petersburg was by far the greatest experience of my life. It was the first time I, you know, left my, comfort zone, I guess. When I go to Kosovo, I'm still with my family. My mom comes with me. My dad comes with me. It's like, but I was thrown into, St. Petersburg, and, my Russian wasn't that good, but, because I'd only studied it for like a semester or two. So, but yeah, it definitely prepared me. Living in a huge city, you have all these different things to do, all these different people, and speaking another language, using a different currency, different cultures, So that has shaped me greatly, and just living alone, living alone, how to manage for yourself and stuff. I've never done that,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it helped me a lot. It helped me a lot.
Okay. So Sean, we have another conversation sometime this summer. I want
Sure.
to catch up in other ways that probably aren't appropriate for um, uh, um, this video.
Do you
But
mind if I tell you one short story real quick?
please, yeah, yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Um, while I was in Kosovo, I wanted to keep up with my Russian, and I brought a few books, right? I have these few books that I brought, and I was reading them, but it wasn't the same. I wanted to talk to somebody, and I have a few friends that I made in Russia that I talk to once in a while. But I was at a high school, at the local high school, and I told somebody that I was in Russia, and this guy was an economics teacher at the school, and he said, "Oh, you know Russian?" He's like, and I was like, "Well, I know a bit, yeah." And he's like, and he starts talking to me in Russian, and I was like confused. Why is this Albanian guy talking to me in Russian? And then he tells me that he, right, because Kosovo was part of Yugoslavia, and right, you had that Soviet influence. So I found out that a lot of schools in Kosovo, well, learned Russian for about 5 years, and my host mom even knew some Russian, which was incredible because like I never knew that. Like I know they knew Serbian, right? I know
Yeah,
they knew
right, right.
Serbo-Croatian, but Russian, I was having a conversation with this 60-year-old economics teacher at this high school in Russian, and it was just crazy. Like I'll never forget that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's always I remember like I remember the meeting this doctor from Kenya. This is a big black guy,
Mm.
and we're at a picnic, and I don't remember how he came across, but like I know Russian, and he's like, oh, and he broke into perfectly fluent Russian because he'd studied to become a medical doctor in Kiev, and had gone to university there and gotten his education. Like the much like one of those things about the USSR is that for the better part of 30 years, it really took very seriously a mission of educating Africa and Asia, um, and so it would like bring tens of thousands of Africans and Asians to Moscow and St. Petersburg. And like you go anywhere, like if you go to Palestine, if you go to China, apparently if you go to places in Africa, like their elite were often educated in the Soviet Union as part of this they called it Druzhba Narodov, the friendship of the peoples or
Yeah.
something like that. But yeah. And so this like when I go to Georgia, the elite of Georgia who are 40 years or older, they all speak Russian because they all went to Soviet schools. They all went to Russian school in Georgia, and then they went and lived in Belarus or Ukraine or Russia and did their post-secondary education in those places. And so, yeah, people forget too often people forget that Russian is an international language, and that you go all over the world and people speak Russian because, you know, I mean, like it wasn't that long ago, 1992, that Russia and the Soviet Union, and that was the other great power, and half the world, you know, they aspired to go to Moscow, and many of them did, and so yeah, it's wild, and then just like this big African guy speaking to me in fluent Russian, and it was just like. It was just such a one of those moments, like you know, you have to shake your head, and it's like, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. So anyway, yeah, it's interesting, those the legacy of empire. Yeah. Shan, this has been a great conversation, so heady and intellectual and cerebral, and you and I'll have another conversation later this summer and touch bases again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Denner.
Peace.